What if I told you that one plastic bucket sitting behind your garage right now could grow you more food than half of your backyard garden bed? Sounds crazy, right? Most people think a real garden needs a big yard, perfect soil, and years of experience. But that is actually a myth, and today I am going to prove it to you. Stick around until the very end, because vegetable number 6 on this list is the one almost nobody talks about, and it might completely change the way you garden forever. If you are new here, welcome. This channel is all about growing real food in small spaces, without wasting money or wasting time. And today we are talking about something a lot of people get wrong. They think containers are just a backup plan for when you do not have a yard. The truth is, containers often beat the ground completely. Why? Because pots heat up faster in spring, which wakes up plant roots earlier. Containers drain better, which means less rot and fewer diseases. And containers give you total control over the soil, instead of fighting whatever dirt happens to be in your yard. So today, I am walking you through 8 vegetables that genuinely grow better in containers, plus one simple trick for each one that will boost your harvest. Let us get started with number 1. Number 1, cucumbers. Let's start with our first top vegetable. Cucumbers are usually the first vegetable that surprises new gardeners, because most people picture them sprawling all over the ground, taking up an entire corner of a yard. But here's the secret almost no one tells you. Cucumbers actually do better when you stop letting them crawl and start training them to climb. If you put a simple trellis or a tomato cage in a large pot and let the cucumber vine grow upward instead of along the ground, 2 amazing things happen. First, the leaves and fruit stay clean and dry, which means fungus and disease have a much harder time spreading. Second, gravity helps the fruit grow long and straight instead of curling and twisting the way ground-grown cucumbers often do. On top of that, containers warm up faster than garden soil in early spring, so your cucumber roots wake up sooner and start producing earlier in the season. Here is the pro tip that will completely change your cucumber harvest. Pick the cucumbers while they are still young and a little smaller than what you see at the grocery store. This feels backwards to a lot of beginners because we are trained to think bigger is always better. But with cucumbers, every fruit you leave on the vine too long sends a signal to the plant that says, your job here is done, you can slow down now. The moment you start harvesting early and often, the plant panics in a good way and pushes out new flowers and new fruit to replace what you just took. The more you pick, the more it produces. It is one of the few vegetables where being a little impatient actually pays off. Number 2, cherry tomatoes. Let's look at the most common container plant. Now let us talk about the vegetable, well, technically a fruit, that almost every single container garden starts with. Tomatoes. But here's where most beginners make their first mistake. They go straight for the giant slicing tomatoes, the kind you would put on a sandwich, and then they get frustrated when their plant only gives them a handful of fruit all summer. If you want a container garden that actually feels rewarding, cherry tomatoes are the smarter choice, and there is a real reason why. Big slicing tomatoes put almost all of their energy into a small number of large fruits. Cherry tomatoes do the opposite. They spread their energy across dozens, sometimes hundreds, of tiny fruits all at once. That means instead of waiting weeks for 1 or 2 tomatoes to slowly ripen, you get constant clusters of fruit ripening little by little throughout the entire summer. It is far more forgiving for beginners, and honestly, it is far more satisfying too, because you are picking something almost every single day instead of waiting around. Here's the tip that separates a good cherry tomato harvest from an incredible one. When you are buying your seeds or seedlings, look specifically for the word indeterminate on the label. Determinate tomato plants grow to a certain size, produce one big harvest, and then basically shut down for the season. Indeterminate varieties never really stop. They keep growing taller, keep flowering, and keep producing fruit all the way until the first frost finally kills the plant in the fall. If you want tomatoes from June all the way through October, indeterminate cherry tomatoes in a large container are exactly what you need. Number 3, peppers. One of the most rewarding crops to grow. If cucumbers love clean leaves and tomatoes love constant picking, peppers have one obsession above everything else, and that is warm roots. Peppers originally come from hot tropical climates, and their roots are happiest when the soil around them feels like a warm blanket. This is exactly where containers completely outperform the ground. A black plastic pot or a fabric grow bag sitting in direct sunlight can warm up significantly faster than the deep soil in a garden bed, especially early in the season when the weather is still a little unpredictable. That extra warmth wakes the pepper plant up sooner, encourages it to flower earlier, and ultimately leads to more peppers by the end of summer. But there is a catch. Peppers are heavy feeders, which is just a fancy way of saying they eat a lot. If you plant them in a pot and then forget about them for 2 months, you will end up with a healthy-looking green plant that barely produces any fruit. The fix is simple. Once your pepper plant starts flowering, add a little compost or a liquid fertilizer every 2 weeks. Think of it like topping off the fuel tank right when the engine needs it most. Flowering and fruit production take an enormous amount of energy, and feeding your plant at exactly the right time is often the difference between a handful of peppers and an overflowing harvest basket. Number 4, pole beans, a vertical cousin that's a genuine space saver. This next one is perfect if you are working with a tiny balcony, a narrow side yard, or basically any space where square footage is your enemy. Bush beans spread outward, taking up a wide footprint of ground space for a relatively small harvest. Pole beans do the opposite. Instead of spreading sideways, they shoot straight upward along a trellis, a fence, or even a simple string tied to a railing. Pole beans do the opposite. Instead of spreading sideways, they shoot straight upward along a trellis, a fence, or even a simple string tied to a railing. This means a corner that could barely fit one sprawling bush bean plant can instead become a tall, productive column of pole beans stacked with pods from top to bottom. It is honestly one of the most space-efficient vegetables you can possibly grow in a container, which makes it perfect for apartment balconies or small patios where every single inch matters. The pro tip here follows the exact same logic as the cucumbers. Pick the bean pods while they are still young, tender, and slightly smaller than what you might expect. If you let pods grow large and mature on the vine, the plant interprets that as a finish line. It assumes its job of producing seeds is complete, and it slows down everything else. But if you keep harvesting young pods constantly, the plant keeps pushing out new flowers in an attempt to replace what was taken. Picking often is not just about getting fresh beans. It is literally the trigger that keeps the entire plant in production mode. Number 5, lettuce. The ultimate choice for instant gratification. If you want a vegetable that rewards patience the least and instant gratification the most, lettuce is it. Lettuce has incredibly shallow roots, which means it does not need a deep container at all. Even a small window box or a shallow planter on a sunny windowsill is more than enough room for lettuce to thrive. Within just a few short weeks of planting seeds, you can already be harvesting fresh, crunchy leaves for salads. There's another huge advantage that only container gardening gives you, and it has to do with heat. Lettuce hates intense summer sun. Once temperatures climb too high, lettuce panics and bolts, which means it shoots up a tall flower stalk and turns bitter almost overnight. If your lettuce is planted directly in the ground, you are stuck. But if your lettuce is in a movable pot, you can simply pick it up and shift it into a shadier spot during the hottest part of the afternoon, protecting it from bolting and stretching your harvest out for weeks longer than ground-grown lettuce ever could. The pro tip that turns one lettuce plant into a never-ending salad bar is called the cut and come again method. Instead of pulling an entire head of lettuce out by the roots, only harvest the outer, more mature leaves and leave the small, tender center of the plant completely untouched. That center keeps growing new leaves continuously, which means a single lettuce plant can keep feeding you fresh greens for weeks, sometimes even months, instead of giving you one single harvest and then being done forever. Number 6, potatoes. The single most underrated container vegetable. Most people assume potatoes have to be grown in long garden rows, dug up with a shovel, and risk getting sliced in half by accident during harvest. Containers completely solve every single one of these problems at once. Most people assume potatoes have to be grown in long garden rows, dug up with a shovel, and risk getting sliced in half by accident during harvest. Containers completely solve every single one of these problems at once. First, let us talk about disease. Potatoes grown directly in the ground are extremely vulnerable to soggy, waterlogged soil, which leads to rot and a whole list of fungal diseases. A container with proper drainage holes almost eliminates this risk entirely because excess water simply flows out the bottom instead of sitting around the tubers. Second, and this is the part that genuinely surprises people, harvesting potatoes from a container is almost embarrassingly easy. Instead of carefully digging through soil with a shovel and risking damaging your potatoes, you simply tip the entire grow bag or bucket over onto a tarp. The potatoes practically fall right out, fully intact and ready to be collected. The pro tip here is a technique called hilling. And it sounds more complicated than it actually is. As your potato plant grows taller and you start to see the stems stretching upward, simply add more soil or compost around the base of the plant, partially covering the lower stem each time. Potato plants are clever. Whenever a portion of stem gets buried, the plant treats it almost like a brand new root system, and it will actually start forming additional potatoes along that buried section. Repeat this hilling process every couple of weeks as the plant grows, and by harvest time, you will have significantly more potatoes packed into that single container than you ever expected. Number 7. Spinach. Spinach has a personality almost identical to lettuce in some ways, but it is even more sensitive to heat, which makes containers an even bigger advantage. Spinach grows incredibly fast, often giving you a harvestable crop within just a few weeks of planting. But the moment temperatures rise too high, spinach bolts almost immediately, sending up flower stalks and turning noticeably bitter in taste. This is exactly where a movable container becomes a genuine superpower. On a hot afternoon, you can simply relocate your spinach pot into a shaded area, like under a porch roof or beside a taller plant that creates natural shade, and protect it from the harsh midday sun. This single action can extend your spinach harvest by weeks compared to spinach planted directly in the ground, which has no way to escape the heat at all. The pro tip for incredible spinach comes down to soil and water. Use rich, compost-heavy soil and make a real effort to keep that soil consistently moist at all times. Dry, stressed soil is one of the biggest reasons spinach turns bitter early. Think of consistent moisture as comfort for the plant. The less stressed your spinach feels, the longer it stays sweet, tender, and enjoyable to eat, instead of rushing toward that bitter, bolted stage way too early in its life. And finally, we have arrived at what might genuinely be the easiest vegetable on this entire list, and possibly one of the easiest vegetables that exists anywhere. Green onions, also known as scallions, will happily grow in almost any small container you can imagine, including recycled food containers, old yogurt cups, or a simple mason jar filled with a little soil and water. They thrive especially well in pots because better drainage keeps their thin roots cleaner and healthier, compared to sitting in the heavier, often soggier soil found in many garden beds. But the real magic with green onions is this final pro tip, and once you know it, you will never look at green onions the same way again. Never pull the entire plant out by its roots. Instead, simply trim off the green tops with a pair of scissors, right above where the white base meets the soil, and leave the roots completely undisturbed underground. Within just a matter of days, fresh green shoots will begin regrowing from that same root system, ready to be trimmed again. This cycle can repeat itself over and over again, sometimes for months, giving you what is essentially an endless, self-renewing harvest from a single planting, all from one tiny pot sitting on a windowsill. So there you have it, 8 vegetables that genuinely grow better in containers than they often do in the ground, from cucumbers climbing straight up a trellis, all the way to green onions regrowing endlessly in a tiny recycled cup on your kitchen counter. The common thread connecting every single one of these plants is simple. Containers give you control. Control over temperature, control over drainage, control over soil quality, and control over exactly where that pot sits depending on the weather that day. That level of control is something a traditional ground garden simply cannot offer, no matter how much space you have. If this video helped you even just a little, do me a huge favor and hit that like button right now before you forget, because it genuinely helps this channel grow and reach more people who are trying to figure out gardening just like you are. And if you have not subscribed yet, go ahead and tap that subscribe button along with the notification bell, because we are dropping new practical container gardening videos every single week, and you do not want to miss what is coming next. Drop a comment below and let me know which one of these 8 vegetables you are trying first. I read every single comment, and I would genuinely love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.